I worked the night shift every Halloween. No one wanted it. The clinic was small, set off Highway 9, surrounded by empty fields and a single gas station that closed before midnight. I used to tell myself I volunteered because I liked the quiet. Truth was, I couldn't stand being home. Too many reminders there. His things, his handwriting, the sound of him still echoing down hallways that were no longer ours. The year after he died, I started staying late at the clinic. At first I blamed it on paperwork. Then I started finding excuses to never leave. That Halloween, the sky broke open with thunder around 10 p.m. The kind that doesn't roll, it cracks. The power flickered twice, the fluorescent bulbs hummed back to life, and the monitors beeped like they'd skipped a heartbeat. I was alone that night. Dr. Lowell had called out with the flu, and Brent, our security guard, was making his rounds outside in the rain. By 2 a.m., the storm had calmed into drizzle. I remember the clock, because it always felt like time slowed down between 2 and 3. Every night shift nurse knows that window, the quiet stretch when machines go still, and the air grows heavier than it should. I was reviewing charts when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow raps on the ambulance bay door. At first I thought it was Brent. Maybe he forgot his key. But the sound didn't come with a voice. No. Hey, it's me. Or open up. Just those measured knocks. I called out, Brent. No answer. I pushed through the double doors, the motion lights flickering above the corridor. The air smelled of antiseptic and wet concrete. When I reached the bay, I peered through the small glass window. The lot was empty, just puddles reflecting the sodium light. Then I noticed the clock on the wall, 2:47 a.m. I told myself it was just the wind, though I'd never heard wind knock before. By morning, I'd half forgotten it, until Brent mentioned he saw footprints by the loading dock. Bare feet, he said, laughing nervously. Could be a prank. I wanted to believe that. A week later, we got a power outage during another graveyard shift. I was restocking gloves when the generator lights flicked on. The bay door camera buzzed on my monitor. Static. Then a frame froze mid-feed. A figure stood outside, blurry, soaked, unmoving. I leaned closer. The shape was tall, slouched, one arm at its side, the other bent like it was holding something. I hit the intercom. Can I help you? Static. When the picture cleared, the figure was gone. I checked the door myself. Nothing. But there was something taped to the metal, an old hospital bracelet, the kind we use for patients. My stomach dropped when I read the name, Paul L. Davis. He'd been my patient, the one who died last Halloween. He was 32, motorbike crash. Massive internal bleeding. I'd stayed with him until he flatlined at 2:47 a.m. I didn't tell anyone about the bracelet, just peeled it off and locked it in my drawer, like it never existed. But from that night on, the knocking returned. Same time, same rhythm, sometimes faint, sometimes loud enough to rattle the door. I'd sit at my desk pretending I didn't hear it. Every muscle locked. Once, I whispered into the air, "What do you want from me?" No answer, just silence, and the faint echo of water dripping from the ceiling tiles. The following Halloween, Brent refused to work. Not after last year, he said. I laughed it off, even though part of me was relieved. That night, the air carried that same storm smell, wet soil, static, metal. The rain started early. I brewed coffee, stacked forms, and told myself I wouldn't look at the clock. But clocks have a way of finding you. 2:47 a.m. blinked on the monitor. Then the sound came again. Knock, 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 knock. This time, it was gentler, almost polite. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the bay door. My pulse thudded so loud it drowned the rain. The glass was fogged from the temperature drop outside. I wiped it with my sleeve. At first, I saw nothing, just darkness pooling against the floodlights. Then a reflection, a face I knew. Not his exactly, but the shape of him, the slope of his shoulders. I whispered his name, Paul. A thud echoed back. Not a knock, a drop, something falling. When I opened the door, the rain hit me like ice. On the ground lay a folded paper, edges soaked red, a note. I took it inside, my hands shaking. The ink had run, but I could still make out the words. You were the only one who tried. I don't remember sitting down, or breathing, just staring at that line until the lights flickered, and the power came back. When daylight came, the note was dry. No blood, no smear, just paper. I took it to Dr. Lowell later that week, told him everything. He looked tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, Jenna, he said gently. You were there when he died. Sometimes trauma writes echoes into our heads. It's not uncommon. He didn't believe me. I didn't blame him. I put the note back in my drawer and stopped talking about it. But the night shifts grew different after that. Machines misfired more. Lights dimmed even when the generator tested fine. I'd catch glimpses on reflective surfaces, movement in corners that stopped when I turned. Once, I heard someone say my name from the supply closet. A man's voice, calm, familiar. I left the clinic that morning before sunrise, sat in my car, and cried until my uniform stuck to my skin. The third year, the clinic shut down. Funding cuts, low patient volume, corporate reasons. I told myself it was over. Then, a week before Halloween, the new hospital called. We're short-staffed for the overnight. Can you cover? Of course I said yes. The new place was bigger, brighter, cleaner. But I still felt that hollow quiet around 2 a.m. That lull where time breathes differently. At 2:47 a.m., my heart already knew before the sound came. Knock, knock. This time it wasn't at a door. It came from the walls. 3 steady raps behind the oxygen storage room. Then silence. I froze. My shift partner, a new intern named Clara, looked at me like she'd heard it too. What was that? She whispered. I didn't answer. I just checked my watch. 2:47. We searched the corridor. Nothing. But on the far wall under a fire extinguisher, something dark stained the tile, rust-colored, old. I reached out before I realized I shouldn't. My glove brushed it. It was tacky, faintly metallic. Blood. When I looked back, Clara was pale. You should see this, she said, pointing to the maintenance door. Someone had carved into the paint with something sharp. 3 knocks equal sign mercy. We called security. Cameras showed no one entering that corridor all night. They laughed it off as vandalism. I didn't. Months passed. I switched to day shifts. Life steadied, at least enough to pretend. Then last Halloween came again. I was off duty, home for once. The rain started around midnight. I tried to sleep, but the wind made that same hollow sound against the siding. At 2:47 a.m., my eyes opened on their own. Silence. Then, knock, knock. From inside the house, I sat up, every nerve screaming. It came from the front door this time. Slow, deliberate. I stood in the hallway, heart hammering, and whispered, Paul. Nothing. Just rain. I reached for the handle, stopped myself, waited. When the sun came up, I finally opened it. There was no one outside, only a small folded paper under the mat. Same handwriting, same line. You were the only one who tried. But underneath, something new was written. Fainter, almost washed away. Now it's your turn. I moved the next week, changed my number, stopped taking night shifts. But sometimes, when it rains, and the power hums low, I catch myself listening too closely to the walls. You'd think after all this time, I'd stop waiting for that sound. And yet, every year when October comes, I still check the clock around 2:47 a.m., and I still hear it, somewhere far off. Knock, knock, knock. I don't answer anymore. Because maybe mercy was never about saving him. Maybe it's about warning the next one. I used to think fluorescent light was harmless, just part of the job. But after what happened in Facility 47, I can't look at that cold blue-white glow without feeling sick. My name's Miles Hanlon, maintenance technician, formerly employed by the Department of Energy's Division of Environmental Research. The kind of place that doesn't exist on Google Maps. Just a dirt road, a badge scanner, and a reinforced gate that only opens if the camera likes your face. I signed the non-disclosure agreement like everyone else. 30 pages, 4 signatures, 2 thumbprints. I didn't think twice. I just needed steady work. The first time I clocked in, it was still dark out. The forest around the complex was silent, too silent for dawn. When the gate closed behind me, the sound reminded me of a coffin lid sealing shut. Inside, everything smelled sterile, like metal and bleach. The walls were a pale gray that made you forget what sunlight looked like. They told me my job was simple. Inspect the environmental chambers every 6 hours, replace any burned-out bulbs, and log readings from the humidity sensors. No questions, no detours, no curiosity. That last part was underlined twice. The weirdness started my second week. I was tightening bolts on a lighting rig when I noticed the wall clocks. All 7 of them showed 11:59 p.m. I checked my wristwatch. 3:10 a.m. Calibration issue. My supervisor, Kearns, said when I reported it. Eek. Happens when the system resets, except it didn't fix itself. The next night, the clocks were still frozen at 11:59, and the next. Then one morning, I walked into the control room and saw something that made my stomach flip. All the log entries from the previous week, gone. Blank spaces where the timestamps should have been. When I asked Kearns, he didn't even look up from his clipboard. Data retention issue. It's handling it, but it didn't exist in the directory. By my 3rd month, I stopped sleeping properly. Every morning, I'd wake up convinced I'd lived that same day before. The coffee tasted the same. The same floor tile was cracked near the supply closet. The same moth kept dying under the same light. I started marking days on my locker door with a Sharpie. Little black lines, 1 per shift. After 2 weeks, there were only 7. Every 8th mark faded overnight. I thought maybe I was losing it, until I found something in my tool bag that wasn't mine. A folded note written on lined paper. You wrote this yesterday. They erased it. The handwriting was mine. It got worse after that. Cameras started freezing for minutes at a time. When they came back, I'd see myself walking past hallways I'd never entered. Once I ran into Dr. Velis in the corridor. She was head of the research wing, always looked half awake, eyes heavy behind her glasses. She said, "Don't stay past shift end, Miles. They don't always reset clean." Before I could ask what she meant, the lights flickered, once, twice, and when they steadied, she was gone. The hallway was empty. That night, I decided to leave a message for myself. Something physical, something they couldn't erase. I wrote a note. If you find this, it's still happening. I folded it, taped it inside my locker door, and went home. When I came back the next night, the paper was gone. In its place was a typed version of the same message. Same words, same layout. But at the bottom, stamped in red ink, were 2 words, authorized copy. The next morning, I caught my reflection in the break room window and almost dropped my mug. There was a smear of red ink on my cheek, the same shade as the stamp. I scrubbed it off, but it didn't fade until nightfall. That was when I started to believe something was rewriting us. Not just our memories, but our actual days. Like someone was editing the world in real time and forgetting to fix the reflections. One evening, Kearns called me into his office. He had the file from my first shift open on his desk. "Maintenance logs look clean," he said, smiling too easily. "You've been doing good work, but you've been asking the wrong questions." "I'm just trying to keep the system stable," I said. He leaned closer. "Do yourself a favor. Don't look at the clocks." That's when I noticed the wall behind him. 7 digital clocks, all blinking 11:59. He turned them off one by one, muttering, "See? No problem." But the hum didn't stop. The electric buzz in the room grew louder. I realized it wasn't coming from the fixtures. It was coming from inside the walls. By the time I made it back to the maintenance corridor, my head was pounding. I sat down by the lockers, trying to breathe. That's when I saw a second set of footprints next to mine. Same boots, same direction, but slightly ahead. And then from down the hallway came the unmistakable sound of a wrench hitting the floor. I turned the corner, expecting to see someone. Instead, I saw myself, standing by chamber B12, flashlight in hand, face blank like a mannequin. I dropped the wrench, turned toward me, and mouthed something I couldn't hear. The lights blinked out. When they came back, I was alone again. After that, I started checking the logs from older months. March, February, even the previous year. Every record stopped at day 47. No continuation, no restart. Just 47 entries, every time. When I brought this to Kearns, his expression changed from annoyance to something colder. "Who gave you clearance to access those?" "They're in the shared drive," I said. He exhaled. "No, Miles. They were. That was the night I found the backup room." The door was unmarked, hidden behind storage. Inside were rows of old computer towers, each labeled with a different date. Some had my handwriting on the tags. On the nearest monitor, a live feed played, me, working at my desk in real time. But the timestamp said October 28th, 2023. It was November 2nd. I hit the keyboard. The screen glitched and froze on one frame, me staring directly into the camera, lips forming words just before static swallowed them. I played it again. This time, I heard the audio. My voice whispered, "If you see this, it means I failed." I didn't go back after that. I drove home at dawn, shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. The next morning, I called HR to resign. The number was disconnected. I tried to contact Kearns. No answer. I even searched for Facility 47 online. No results. Not even in government databases. When I checked my employment history, the last recorded job I held was at a hardware store in 2018. My pay stubs from the last 6 months were gone. Even my calendar app had erased every event since May. For a while I convinced myself I'd hallucinated it all. Until last week. A courier dropped off a brown envelope at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, with a printed timestamp 11 hours 59 minutes and 47 seconds p.m. And under it, my own signature. I didn't sign it. Since then, I've noticed something strange. The clocks in my house keep resetting to midnight. Even my phone battery lasts forever if I leave it on the charger overnight. But the time never advances. It's like everything's waiting for something to restart. I tried to stay awake last night, just to see if it would happen again. At some point I must have drifted off. When I opened my eyes, the window was dark. The alarm clock flickering. 11:59. I stared at it for maybe a full minute before it blinked. Not to 12 o'clock. To 11 hours 59 minutes and 47 seconds. Then again, like time was stuck inside that same breath. I don't know if I'm still in that building. Some nights, when the air conditioner hums too long, it sounds just like the generators. And every now and then, the lights flicker. Once, twice, and I catch my reflection in the window. He's still there, still tightening that same bolt, still looking up at the clock that never changes, still waiting for the shift to end. I was never supposed to be there after dark. That's the first rule of real estate photography. Shoot before sundown. Get your shots. Get out. But money talks, and the agent promised double pay if I could deliver the photos by morning. So on October 31st, yeah, Halloween, because of course it had to be, I loaded my camera gear into the trunk and drove toward Hollow Creek, where the listing sat at the edge of nowhere. The GPS signal faded halfway down the dirt road. I remember thinking how cliché it all felt. Fog rolling over the tree line, the radio cutting out mid-song, the woods pressing in like they were listening. When I pulled up, the house looked less abandoned than forgotten. 3 stories, Victorian bones beneath a skin of rot and ivy. Every window was boarded except one, the attic, where a faint light flickered like a dying candle. I figured it was just leftover wiring or some reflection. I wish I'd turned around right then. I told myself I was a professional, not some thrill seeker. I'd shot worse, moldy basements, foreclosed motels, even a funeral home once. But something about this place felt too quiet. The front door was unlocked. No surprise. What surprised me was how warm it was inside. Houses that sit empty that long shouldn't hold heat. Calloway, I muttered, pulling out my phone to check the message thread. Agent Calloway had texted me the address that morning. Just the address. No key code, no notes. When I called to confirm, he didn't pick up. The air smelled like dust and candle wax. My footsteps echoed more than they should have. I set up my tripod in the foyer, started snapping test shots. The camera shutter sounded too loud, like it didn't belong in there. Every time it clicked, I half expected to hear something click back. It started around 8:40 p.m. I was shooting the dining room when the intercom on the wall crackled to life. One of those old built-in systems, the kind you see in 70s houses. Hello? The voice was faint, distorted. Male. I froze. Calloway? I said, stepping closer. Is someone here? Static hissed back. Then, softly, the same voice repeated, clearer this time. Owen. My name. I hadn't said my name. Not once since I entered the house. I tried to laugh it off. Funny prank, I muttered. But my pulse was pounding. I walked through the living room, scanning the walls for where the intercom wires led. Every speaker grill was coated in dust. No footprints. No sign of life. Then I saw the photo frames. Family portraits. Decades old. Their faces sun-faded. But someone had scratched out the eyes. Every single one. I took a photo out of habit. The flash lit up the hallway, and in that momentary burst, I saw something standing behind me in the mirror above the mantel. A tall silhouette. Still. Watching. When the flash faded, it was gone. I should have left. But logic is a tricky thing when you're scared. You start thinking if you just find the reason, the fear will make sense. Around 9:15, I made it to the upstairs hallway. The temperature dropped like a switch flipped. My breath fogged. There was a small red light blinking down the hall. A dictaphone on the floor, still recording. I crouched and hit play. The first few seconds were just static. Then a man's voice, low, hurried. She's in the house. She's taking pictures. She doesn't know yet. Then silence. Then my own voice. Calloway? Is someone here? I dropped it. The playback had recorded my voice before I'd even said those words. By now, every instinct screamed to get out. I ran down the stairs, half-packed my gear. But when I reached the front door, it wouldn't open. The knob turned, but the door felt fused to the frame. I yanked harder. No movement. Behind me, the intercom crackled again. This time, two voices. One was mine. The other whispered over it, repeating every word a split second later. I covered my ears, shouting, "Stop it." The echo stopped. Then through the static, the whisper said one more thing. "Take your last picture." I don't remember setting the camera back up, but I did. Some compulsive part of me thought, if I capture proof, it'll be real. It won't just live in my head. I lifted the viewfinder toward the staircase. Click. The flash went off. Too bright, too fast. And for a split second, I saw her. A woman at the top of the stairs. Pale dress. Bare feet. Her head tilted, as if she'd been waiting for me to notice her for a very long time. When the light faded, the stairs were empty. But my camera display wasn't. The photo showed her perfectly clear, right down to the reflection in her eyes. And in that reflection, I saw myself standing beside her. My phone buzzed then, startling me. "Unknown number," I answered. "Mr. Mercer?" A woman's voice. Calm, polite. "This is Agent Calloway's office. I'm calling about the Hollow Creek property." "Yeah," I said, voice shaking. "The listing you sent me. It's not safe. Someone's inside that house." A pause. Then she said, "Sir, that's not possible. The Hollow Creek house burned down in 2019. The call disconnected." I stood there in silence, phone trembling in my hand, the air around me thick with smoke that hadn't been there a second ago. Then faintly, from the attic above me, came the sound of a camera shutter. Click. I don't remember how I got out. 1 second I was in the foyer, the next I was outside, crawling down the porch steps, gasping in the cold night air. The house was dark again, every window lifeless. My car was still running, headlights cutting through the mist. I drove until dawn, without stopping once. When I got home, I dumped my memory card onto my laptop. Half the photos were gone. The rest, glitched, distorted, colors inverted. Except one. The last picture I took. The woman on the stairs. But now, in the photo, she was gone. And someone else was standing in her place. Me. I quit photography after that. Started doing warehouse shifts. Anything that didn't require a camera or silence. But sometimes, late at night, my phone lights up on its own. Playback resumed, it says. When I check, there's no audio file on my device. Just an empty waveform, and a single whisper buried under the static. "Your turn. I've replaced 3 phones. Moved cities twice. Doesn't matter. Every October, it starts again." The playback resumes. The voice learns a new word. Last night, for the first time it said something different. Not your turn. It said, our turn. Now when I see old houses with lights on upstairs, I don't stop. I don't look. Because maybe that voice isn't warning me. Maybe it's calling me back. And one night soon, I think I might finally answer.